You feel the urge. You stand up, walk to a small private room, close the door and lock it. You are completely alone for the next 2 minutes. That door, that lock, that solitude, for almost the entire span of human existence, none of it existed. The private bathroom is one of the youngest inventions you use every single day. And the way your ancestors handled this ordinary, unavoidable need tells you more about how humans really lived than almost anything else they left behind. Because here is the strange truth. What comes out of a body is one of the best historical records we have. Bones rot, wood rots, stories get forgotten, but human waste, under the right conditions, can survive for thousands of years. Archaeologists even have a word for fossilized feces. They call it a coprolite, and a single coprolite can tell you what a person ate, what diseases they carried, and how they lived their last few days. Let's start at the very beginning. Before farming, before villages, before walls, for roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors were nomadic foragers. They moved. A small band would camp in one place for days or weeks, then pack up and follow the food. And when nature called, they simply walked a short distance from camp and went on the open ground, the way nearly every wild animal does. This sounds primitive. It was actually brilliant, because they kept moving. Their waste never piled up. It dried in the sun, broke down in the soil, and was left behind when the group moved on. There were no sewers, because there was no need for sewers. A group of 30 people walking across a landscape barely marks it. But your ancestors were not careless. There is good evidence they were instinctively hygienic in ways that protected them. Look at modern hunter-gatherers studied by anthropologists, and you see consistent patterns. The Hadza of Tanzania, foragers studied for decades, relieve themselves away from where they sleep and eat. This is not a written rule. It is the same quiet instinct that makes you wrinkle your nose at a bad smell. Disgust is an ancient survival tool. It keeps you away from the exact things that can infect you. Now think about wiping. What did people actually use? The honest answer is whatever the local environment gave them. Smooth stones, handfuls of grass, large leaves, moss, which is soft and surprisingly absorbent, snow in cold climates, even sand and seashells along coastline. Your ancestors read their surroundings the way you read a menu. Every landscape offered its own solution. Then, around 12,000 years ago, everything changed. Humans started to farm, and farming meant something humans had almost never done before. It meant staying in one place. This is where the story gets uncomfortable, because when you stop moving, your waste stops moving too. Suddenly, you have hundreds of people living together, year after year, in the same spot, and all of that waste has nowhere to go. Look at Çatalhöyük, one of the oldest known towns on Earth, in what is now Turkey, around 9,000 years old. Thousands of people lived there in mud brick houses, packed so tightly that residents walked across the rooftops and climbed down ladders into their homes. Archaeologists who excavated the site, including the team led by Ian Hodder, found that these early town dwellers dumped waste and refuse in specific areas, Middens, just outside or between the houses. The smell must have been constant. Researchers studying the human remains there have found evidence of the diseases that come with crowded living. The trap of settled life was sanitation, and humanity walked straight into it. So here is the great irony. As humans got more advanced, going to the bathroom got worse, not better. The nomad on the open plain had it cleaner than the citizen of the first cities. This is the counterintuitive heart of the whole story. We imagine progress as a straight line toward comfort, but for thousands of years, the price of living together was living in your own filth. Cities did not solve the bathroom problem. Cities created it. Now let's reconstruct a single concrete scene, because this is where it becomes real. Picture Roman Britain, in the city of York, roughly 900 years ago in the Viking Age. Archaeologists from the York Archaeological Trust excavated a site at Coppergate and found something extraordinary. A complete, preserved human stool, so large and intact it became one of the most famous artifacts in British archaeology. They nicknamed it the Lloyds Bank Coprolite, after the bank built on the site. That single specimen was studied by paleoscatologist Andrew Jones, a scientist who genuinely analyzes ancient excrement for a living. And what he found was haunting. The person who produced it had eaten mostly bread and meat, with almost no vegetables, and their gut was full of the eggs of parasitic worms. Hundreds of them. This person, 1,000 years ago, was carrying a living infestation inside them, and they almost certainly had no idea. For most of human history, intestinal worms were simply a fact of being alive. Now picture the Romans themselves, who were obsessed with engineering. They built public latrines, long stone benches with rows of holes, where dozens of people sat side by side. No walls, no doors, no privacy whatsoever. You did your business shoulder to shoulder with strangers, holding a conversation, conducting business, catching up on gossip. The bathroom was a social space, and to clean themselves, many Romans used something called a tersorium, a natural sea sponge fixed to the end of a stick. The Roman writer Seneca describes a man using exactly such a device. Here is the part that makes people flinch. In many public latrines, that sponge on a stick was shared, rinsed in a channel of running water or a bucket of vinegar, and passed to the next person. It is one of the leading theories for the origin of the phrase, getting the wrong end of the stick. Stop and feel that for a moment. The thing you do today behind a locked door in total silence, your ancestors did in a crowded stone room, talking to a neighbor, sharing a sponge. The line between public and private ran in a completely different place than it does for you now. And the worms were not unique to one unlucky Viking. They were everywhere in the human past. Archaeologist Piers, who studies ancient parasites at the University of Cambridge, has examined latrines, graves, and coprolites from across the ancient world. His work shows that as humans shifted to farming and crowded settlements, parasite infections rose, not fell. The very moment your ancestors built toilets and sewers, they were also spreading the eggs of worms through their food and water more efficiently than ever. Roundworm, whipworm, tapeworm. These were lifelong companions for ordinary people. Imagine carrying that quietly inside you for decades and thinking it was simply how a body felt. There is one more detail that makes the ancient bathroom feel utterly foreign. There was rarely anything we would call toilet paper. The Romans had their shared sponge. In other parts of the world, people used water, the cleanest method of all, poured or splashed by hand. In ancient China, archaeologists have found hygiene sticks, thin slips of bamboo or wood wrapped in cloth, used for exactly this purpose. Paper made specifically for the bathroom did not become common in the West until well into the modern era. For most of history, what you reached for afterward was whatever your culture had decided was normal, and normal varied wildly from one place to the next. So why does this matter beyond the shock of it? Because hidden inside this taboo story is a deeper truth about you. The disgust you feel reading this is not weakness. It is one of the oldest and most protective feelings your brain produces. Researchers like Valerie Curtis, who spent her career studying disgust at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, argued that revulsion toward waste evolved precisely because it kept our ancestors away from disease. The people who felt sick at the sight and smell of filth avoided it, survived, and had children. The ones who didn't often didn't. You are descended from the squeamish ones. Your disgust is an inheritance, and consider how recent your comfort really is. The flush toilet you take for granted only became common in homes within roughly the last 150 years. Modern sewage systems, the ones that quietly carry everything away and keep cholera out of your drinking water, are younger than the telephone. Dr. John Snow famously traced a deadly cholera outbreak in London in 1854 to a single contaminated water pump on Broad Street, proving that disease was spreading through water fouled by human waste. That discovery, barely more than a century and a half ago, is the reason a trip to the bathroom is not a gamble with your life. Think about what that means. Across 300,000 years of human existence, the safe, clean, private bathroom has existed for a sliver so thin it barely registers. Your great-great-grandparents almost certainly used an outhouse, a chamber pot, or a hole in the ground. Worms, foul smells, and shared facilities were normal for nearly everyone who ever lived. You are part of a tiny, lucky fraction of all humans who have ever existed who can do this safely, cleanly, and alone. So the next time you walk into that small room and lock the door, notice the silence. Notice the privacy. Notice that you are not sharing a sponge with a stranger, not carrying worms you'll never know about, not breathing the air of an open midden between mud-brick homes. Every one of those quiet luxuries was bought with thousands of years of disease, discovery, and slow, hard-won engineering. You feel the urge. You stand up, walk to a small private room, close the door and lock it. And for the next 2 minutes, you experience a kind of comfort, safety, and solitude that almost no human in history ever knew.